Welcome to Skin and Soul. I'm Gwenm Carsley, a transformational body, sex, and soul coach, and I'm inviting you on a bold, unfiltered journey into the heart of our humanity through the lens of Eros. This is where we strip away the shame, dive into the unspoken, and embrace the wild, raw truth of our desires. Together, we'll crack open the taboo, uncover our deepest intimacies, and awaken the pulse of our sexual essence. Because real transformation, it's messy, it's thrilling, and it's oh so delicious. Buckle up, loves. Skin and Soul Beyond the Pale starts in 3, 2, 1. Let's go. Hello and welcome. I'm Gwenm. I'm your host of Skin and Soul Beyond the Pale. And today I want to welcome in David Bederman, who is a spiritual teacher, an executive coach, and the creator of the Personality Code. Which is something we're going to dive deeply into today, which draws on Kabbalah, not as a doctrine, but as an ancient energetic framework for understanding desire, attraction, behavior, and the hidden wiring shaping how we love, create, and evolve. So his system explores what he calls our energetic blueprint, the patterns we bring into relationships, intimacy, purpose, and even in our relationship to God, and how becoming conscious of that wiring can change the way we live and love. So welcome, welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and the first thing I want to do is just get you to explain a little bit around what Kabbalah is, as well as the personality code and how they relate to each other.
Sure. Well, Kabbalah, it means to receive, and it is I describe it as the universal success wisdom, and it's kind of like the matrix code that explains or describes the building blocks of this world, and specifically the personality code, which is a system that I developed from the wisdom of Kabbalah that explains how we behave, how we interact, and how we attract.
Okay, so can you give us some examples around, because I'm taking it from I did the erotic blueprint, so I'm assuming it has yeah, just give me a little bit of the flavors around what the blueprints are comprised of.
Sure. So according to Kabbalah, there are 10 main energies in the world, and this is why we have 10 numbers in our number system. We have 10 fingers and 10 tones. All the tens line up, and so there's just like when you shine light through a prism, so the white light diffracts into the 7 component colors. So too, when the Creator's infinite life energy shines into this planet, it refracts into 10 different energies. And so basically, while most people would say that behavior is random, in fact, there's actually a very specific pattern to behavior. And everybody you meet is coming through one of these 10 specific energies, which qualify our unique gifts and our strengths, but also the places that we get stuck and where we end up needing to grow. And that kind of makes up the backdrop of it. And the way I describe it is that just like there is one electricity flowing into your room and it's powering the lights and the air conditioner, so too each one of those devices is wired in its own way to use that electricity to perform their own unique function. So too with us, we are all wired in a very specific way. And so we make use of this infinite life energy that's penetrating and giving all of us life. Each person that you meet is coming through one of these 10 energies and is wired in their own unique way to utilize this energy in their own special way. So this is why we all have our own gifts and our own places that we need to grow.
Okay, so would you say that we're born with it? Like, are you saying that we're coming in with our soul's code kind of coming in, or are we coming in, is it something that's shaped in at a very young age? I'd say, like at a baby or pregnancy, etc.
Sure, I'd say it's more of a soul code that from a mystical perspective, each person is here, each soul is there's a famous author, Pierre de Teilhard, I think, and he said that we are not human beings having a spiritual experience. We are spiritual beings having a human experience. And so mystically, each one of us is a soul, and a soul is a part of the creator. And that soul has a journey to go on, a journey of growth, a journey of something to fix. And so that soul is in our body and is here on this planet for this journey. And so we're each kind of given a journey. It's kind of a soul blueprint or a soul code. I call it the personality code. And it's the code of your unique soul's journey in this world and your journey of growth and your journey towards becoming the most successful version of yourself.
Okay, so can you give me an example? Like, I'm just trying to think, like, how does this play out in terms of, let's say, purpose and relationships for yourself? So if I'm looking at you and you say, like, okay, so where is your personality code streaming through from which gateway?
Great question. So one of the main things that I like to say early on is when people start to discover this language that people tend to identify with it, that I am a this or I am a that. And the truth is that we're we're all kind of given a set of paints, and we're painting our individual canvas of life
Hmm.
with our own paintbrushes. And so each of us tend to gravitate towards a certain color, right? A certain one of the 10 energies. And so we're painting in all the different shades of our color, and that feels most familiar, and that feels it feels like who we are. But the goal is not to become an expert at painting your canvas with your own color. The goal is to become expert at painting the canvas of life with whichever color you feel best represents the way that you feel the world is calling you to show up in that moment. So, one of the 10 energies, excuse me, one of the 10 energies is Netzach, and Netzach is like power and strength. And so if you ever meet somebody who is a control freak, for
Hmm.
example, somebody who's very power focused. So none of these are good or bad, but we all have a tendency where we can go when we are enlightened or when we are evolved, or where we go if we are unconscious, let's say. And so somebody coming through Netzach who's unconscious, they often get very lost in the world of power and control. And so they're often getting lost in and creating conflict and confrontation because they are somebody who's on the journey through rectifying the imbalance in the sense of their own power. So their soul is on a journey to balance that out. And so they often are very confrontational, very powerful, often very successful in business because they know how to show up and they know how to win arguments and they know how to get the deal. And, you know, at their worst, they can also be very narcissistic and self-absorbed. But yet at
Hmm.
their best, imagine someone with all of that potential who then uses those gifts to, improve the lives of others and shield people from harm and, to help the less fortunate, right? So this is exactly who you want to have there. But somebody who is not aware of their unconscious patterns and is just lost in their own sense of powerlessness. And so they overcompensate and they tend to become very confrontational and like that. Myself, I was coming through another lens, which we call Bina, which is the lens of emotional understanding. So these are the artists and the poets and the musicians, the people who are very creative and have a very powerful emotional experience. So I myself was always getting lost in just a tremendous up and down of strong, overwhelming emotions, being able to see and feel and read everybody else, but not able to turn off that switch. You're just feeling everything everywhere all the time. So it gives way to a tremendous potential for creativity and expression and music and art, and coaching. And there's also their own challenges for not getting caught up in the overwhelming emotional experience of life that can just, inundate you if you don't have sunglasses on a sunny day.
Right. So would you look at it as something that is fixed or malleable? So I know I get that like we come in and we've got our colors and let's say if it's blue, I'm pretty sure mine is blue, right? And exploring all of the different facets of it, and coming in through a certain gateway, whether it's power or creativity or um, how do you see it? I understand that it's like a form of growth. So how do you see it as, I guess that's the question, fixed or malleable, right? So, for instance, like I know that most people, even in erotic blueprints, will say, "Oh, I'm a sensual," or "I'm an energetic," or whatever it is. And there's this innate, there's the growing in one area, and then there's also, what if I want to be more powerful? What if I want to step into, right, instead of getting boxed in? So, how do you view this framework in terms of growth?
So what's fixed is the journey that we are given for our growth. I mean, mystically speaking, we before we come into this world, we are shown our entire life. We're shown our parents. We're shown our journey and our challenges, and we sign a contract. We say, I'm signing up for that. Give me. I want the David Bederman ride. Give me that." And so what's fixed is the stage for which and the role we're going to play. And it's a good analogy is that this world is like a divine improv. So, like Shakespeare says, all of the world is a stage, and
Hmm.
it's a stage for never-ending growth and self-discovery. So the in the analogy, the subject of the improv is given, and you are assigned a character, but what is malleable is what you choose to do with that character, how you choose to develop that character, like that famous study of twins who were born to alcoholic parents, and they interviewed one of the twins was, doing really well and, never touched a drink in his life, and the other one was, unfortunately struggling also with alcoholism. And they asked, the one son, how is it you've gone through so much and you came out without any addictions, and you came clean? And he said, well, how could I not? And they asked the other son, who was struggling with being an alcoholic, said, how could you go through this and get caught up in the same thing yourself? And his answer was the same:
Okay.
how could I not? And so
Right.
it's really weird what qualifies our journeys in this world from a mystical perspective is the choices that you make. We have no control over what we create in this world. Like, I can choose
Mm.
to shoot a gun. We don't control whether the bullet fires, where the bullet hits, but what we do control is our choices, and we are judged on the choices that we make, because the choices that we make, that is the only thing that is fundamentally, objectively ours in this world. And so on the stage of divine improv, we choose who we become, and we choose what we do with the gifts that we're given.
Mm. So I'm going to go with, I both agree with you and disagree with you. I just had this discussion with my son, and I agree with you. I think that that our power to choose is massive, and yet there are some people in this world, for whatever reason, come into this world with, I'm going to say, less awareness, less desire for awareness, less ability to tap into that consciousness. Like perhaps if we're looking at that analogy of the alcoholic versus the one that comes out clean, um, I'm always curious of like what defines a person to become more conscious and to seek that greater. a deeper experience, right? Where some people are just like, no, I don't get it. I've noticed it in my life. So I'm just curious what you think on that.
So, according to the Kabbalah, there are five levels of the soul, and and each soul is made up of these five levels, okay? And we have a fixing, or in Hebrew, a tikkun, to do on each of these five levels. And so, generally, what happens is that for the first time a soul comes into the world, all five levels are kind of incarnated in that body, in that incarnation, and that soul has the opportunity to fix all five levels, which is quite an undertaking, spiritually speaking. So if that person does not succeed in rectifying, fixing all of those five levels, so then they are reincarnated, in another lifetime. But then each individual level is reincarnated one at a time. So the point is that there's five levels of soul, and they each correspond to different levels of consciousness, that you could say. And so what you're experiencing is, you could meet somebody who this incarnation is, the very basic, ground level animalistic soul, and you could meet somebody who is on, the highest level of consciousness, and that's the incarnation that they're working on. And so what you're experiencing, this is why when you experience someone who is a young soul, or someone who is an old soul, you're experiencing somebody who is at, a much more advanced stage of their spiritual evolution, so to speak. And some people are just, um, they're just focused on fixing, a much more fundamental or basic level of the soul, you could
Mm.
say. And so, and that's what I think you're feeling when you meet it. I experience the same thing, it just qualifies that we're all on different journeys. We've all been here before, and
Mhm.
many of us will likely come back, you know, many more times.
I always want to come back. I'm still one of those souls that's like, I just want to stay a while. I tend to like it
Yes.
here. So what do you think about then bringing in soul's love connection and how that plays into our personalities and our soul's growth?
What you mean?
Like in terms of relationships. So to me, we come into this world and we're looking for our soulmates, or we're bonded in our connections. So how does the personality code, or how we show up in this world, in our soul's code, show up in relationships
So one
or
of the
play out in
main,
relationships?
sure, one of the main, things that causes someone to be reincarnated is if they have not met their soulmate, or if their soulmate has not done the fixing that they need to do. And sometimes we could be brought back to support that our soulmate in doing
Mm.
in fulfilling their mission, so to speak. But what's powerful about romantic relationships is that, from a mystical perspective, we are here to grow. Growth is the journey of navigating challenges and and growing through them. And your partner is usually the person who is going to shine a light on the darker places of your consciousness that you need to focus on, the places in your soul that you need to grow. Psychologically, we there's two real parts of us, and there's this part of us called the shadow, right? This part of us that we like to pretend doesn't exist. This part of ourself that maybe when we were younger, didn't get praise. When I behaved in a certain way, maybe I was rebuked, or I was punished. And so we kind of learn growing up that there are parts of me that are okay to express, and parts of me that people don't like very much, or parts of me that are not good. And so we
Mm.
try to play those down, and we try to ignore those. But ultimately, becoming a complete person is learning how to come to peace with all parts of ourselves. And those parts that did not get enough attention, those parts that are less developed than all those other parts of us, they need to grow. And so the romantic relationships that we attract, they they tend to shine the light on the places where we need the most growth.
Mm. So then I'm curious to know where, because I know Kabbalah really celebrates desire, divine sexuality, divine union. How does it feel about having multiple partners or growth through relationships, or does it celebrate one union?
I would say that the the goal is for people to grow, and the type of growth that is, I would say, most celebrated in Kabbalah is the growth between, two married partners. Because what what when you look at, for example, the yin yang, right? You have the white is whole and complete, and the black is whole and complete. But when you bring them together, so there is a unity that neither one is able to experience on their own, and that's the unity of the circle, right? This is the unification of opposites. And so it's within the union of love is the possibility to bring children into the world. And certainly the I would say the model of the family, and learning how to go outside of yourself and give to another, also to your spouse, also to a child, right? Within the context of the family, that's really the place where, I would say, sexuality is focused most within the Kabbalah.
Okay. Now, from what I understand, it's in Kabbalah, it's not sexuality or desire isn't something necessarily to transcend. It's not something to let go of. It's something that is very celebrated, um, which is very different than most religions, right? Because I find that the mystics really celebrate pleasure, Eros, within divine union, however you want to translate it. So, how does that? How do you feel like in terms of desire and growth within this system?
So so I would say that there is a context of what's called kedusha, which is holiness. And holiness comes through separation. So there's a big focus within the mystical teachings about the differentiation between holy and unholy, meaning there, like, for example, we don't have holy discussions in the washroom, for example. But why? I mean, can't the creator be found everywhere? And the answer is
Mhm.
yes, but there are different levels of consciousness, and there are and different consciousness different levels of consciousness are able to conceive of or different levels of holiness. So, for example, the the fundamental, I would say, view in Kabbalah is that there is one infinitely loving consciousness that is, was, and will always be. And this consciousness is the source of our being, and this is the creator, or the Ein Sof, the infinite one. And this infinite one is the source of our being, and all of life and all of the world is happening within that one infinitely loving consciousness. But that versus some other belief systems that worship, multiple gods. And I would say that's the fundamental viewpoint. So on that level, there are distinctions of holiness, and and I guess that is one thing that would qualify, for example, you know, the difference of idolatry. And idolatry is uh, now we're getting more into a religious discussion, but
Mhm.
idolatry is kind of the the I would say the exact opposite of what Kabbalah is teaching.
Mhm.
And what is so dangerous about idolatry, though? People who were idolaters, they were people who worshipped the individual forces observed and experienced in nature as separate deities, as separate gods,
Mhm.
right? And so you would see the sun and the sun god and the money god and the sex and the love god, and all of these individual components of the natural world would themselves be worshipped as an individual divine expression. And so on that level, you can experience holiness anywhere, right? Everything is holy. Everything, you can find sparks of holiness in everything, which is absolutely true. But what the Kabbalah is suggesting is that there are higher sparks of divinity and lower sparks. And so we differentiate. And so there's a big focus on what differentiates us from animals, right? We all have the need to eat and the need to procreate and the desire to do all of these things, but
Mhm.
yet there is a fundamental difference between human and animal in that the human being has a higher level of a soul, a higher level of consciousness, a higher level of self-awareness. And so the way that we fulfill our spiritual mission from a Kabbalistic perspective is that we behave differently from animals. And so it's not about doing whatever I feel whenever I feel. It's about aligning ourselves with a higher concept of what is good and what is right and what is holy. And this is part of the journey of self-actualization, is when we are able to kind of channel these drives from, the drive for, romantic connection. Well, if you do it, feel it. Great, that's one level, but there's a higher level that says, if I can direct that energy into a holy partnership and the framework of a family, and the consciousness that of giving myself to another, and right, it's a whole different fire that you can build from. And I think that, I would say, is what kind of differentiates the Kabbalistic viewpoint from many, maybe some other belief systems.
Yeah, I wanted to just focus in on uh, because I just heard you saying, that there's uh, levels of what is right and
Holiness.
wrong, or levels of holiness. Okay, and so bringing in like the concept of desire, the concept of love, the concept of sacred sex or just sexuality. How do you feel that from the Kabbalah perspective that desire is holy, that it is amongst the holiest? Or are you saying it's a lower level?
Oh, 1,000%. It's one of the highest. It's one of the highest. It has
Yeah.
one of the highest potential for spiritual actualization.
Hmm.
Um, but it all depends on how we actualize that, on how we choose to express that energy, where we choose to
Okay.
channel it.
And how how does it show up in its highest form? What would be the experience of showing up in divine union from the Kabbalistic experience?
I would say family, through family, through
Okay.
channeling that energy. The highest form is channeling that energy into the union of of a family, a thousand,
Okay.
and all of the challenges and forced growth that that brings. I would say family.
And where does pleasure come in for the union um, of the union between the masculine and the feminine? So, bringing in desire as God, pleasure as God, divine union between the union of the two coming together, which I understand is family, but I'm thinking more in their union, and togetherness. Am I making sense?
So the yeah, so that I mean, so what we're talking about now is it sounds like is the masculine and the feminine as energies themselves in the
Hmm.
world, and the these are the two fundamental forces that that kind of make up the physical world, and they're they're expressed throughout nature. These are the fundamental forces that drive all of the the birds and the bees, the birds pollinating the birds pollinating the trees, and then the bees pollinating the flowers, and enabling the actual procreation of fruit and trees and food, to the romantic desire and attraction between a man and a woman. This all breaks down to the fundamental energies of masculine and feminine. And
Hmm.
so what's the question in there specifically?
Well, I think I'm more curious about because I was asking you about the highest form of, let's say, love and expressing desire, expressing pleasure, and how Kabbalah allows that, brings that in. Because oftentimes, let's face it, religion just likes to deaden pleasure, likes to suppress that. It's become something dirty. Become something unwanted, especially out in the world. It's something to be immensely controlled. And from what little I know of Kabbalah, I know that it's much more expressive from the perspective of love, from the containment of love, being in union with, but that there's this higher expression of love between mates, between soulmates, if you will. And so I was curious about how that shows up in intimacy, how that shows up quite literally in the bedroom, like how that is taught, how that is expressed.
I mean, Kabbalistically speaking, a man has an obligation to pleasure his wife, um, period.
Which is very lovely.
So
Yes.
it's a very high, it's a very important and necessary requirement for the woman's pleasure, 1,000%.
And is there a teaching around this? Like, do you find that it's passed down or that it's within the religion that there's a map and a pathway?
Yes, and um, yes and no. There I would say it's more focused on. I mean, I know like there is a whole world of like the tantric arts
Hmm.
and this is it less shows up in the Kabbalistic teachings. I guess the Kabbalistic teachings are less focused on there. I'm sure there's aspects of it that I haven't discovered that are focused on that. But I would say the the main teachings of the Kabbalah are focused on helping us navigate this world successfully and understanding what is love and how to build real love, how to differentiate between holy and unholy, and understand the dynamics of this world. There are aspects, I know the tantric arts, they're very focused on that. Personally, I've seen that less in the areas of Kabbalah that I've studied, and more of the focus on navigating this world, understanding love, understanding our own unique personal journeys, less focused on the intricacies of pleasure. But I know they're out there.
Okay. So then looking at the feminine and masculine energies, how does that play out within the frameworks of your personality code? So that's going to, because each one is going to be expressed differently with their own um, energy equations, if I have that right.
Yeah, so typically, I mean, every person has masculine and feminine energy. Typically, men tend to be mostly in the masculine and women tend to be mostly in the feminine, but it's not always that way. And you have men who are very much grounded in their feminine essence, right? In their emotional essence. You have women that are very grounded in their masculine. Um, Pardon me. And I find that the the key to navigating, first of all, a successful life journey yourself, but certainly navigating a successful romantic partnership or relationship is understanding and developing that balance within yourself. And so a lot of times, whether a man is more masculine or more feminine, whether a woman is more masculine or more feminine, either way, they a lot of people tend to get stuck in one and
Mhm.
can often be disconnected from the other. And so you could get a man who is very stuck in his masculine and has no connection to his feminine, has no connection to his emotions, and is just very masculine. And so he will often attract a very feminine partner who has no connection to her masculine side and to her ability to, draw boundaries, express her own desire in the world, right? So she'll be just masculine, she'll be just feminine, he'll be just masculine, and that will create a very attractive force. But ultimately, the goal of that is for each person to balance out. You also get men who are very grounded in their feminine and they don't have a strong connection to their masculine, and they'll attract a woman who is very much out there in her masculine, in the business world succeeding, but also very disconnected from her feminine, from her emotions, from her feminine experience. And the same thing with the goal of each person establishing balance. And so I think everyone needs to develop a clear relationship with those two sides of themselves, because a healthy relationship is a relationship where the man is able to flow naturally between his masculine and feminine essence, and the woman is able to do the same. Typically the woman will have a stronger grounding in her feminine core, and the man will have a stronger grounding in his masculine core, but each still has the need to flow through both energies because those energies are fundamental in each of our experience, and they're flowing all the time through each of us. And it's when we are disconnected or when we're stuck, so that's where the energy gets stuck in us, and that shows up in all sorts of ways, be it a toxic or unhealthy relationship, or in other ways of disease within the person themselves.
Okay, so when you're looking at through, and I'm just going through the lens of the personality code. So as, let's say, as a, well, I guess one of my first questions is, so through the lens of the personality code, do you feel that there are gender roles assigned to each of them? So I'm going to just say, because you brought up power and the artists. So do you see more women, for instance, in the artist realm, or men in the power realm? And how does it show up then if in the reversal? Like, is there an imbalance, I would say, within the energy, or often an imbalance within the energy?
So just so I understand your question, are are you are you asking, are some energies intrinsically more feminine and others more masculine? Is that your
Yeah.
question?
Hmm.
Great question. Yes, 1,000%. There is a balance to be achieved in every energy. And but yes, some energies are more intrinsically masculine or feminine, and certainly that will show up, in the person. So, for example, like, if you have somebody who's coming through the energy of chesed or kindness, right? So this is the typical people pleaser, someone who is they just love helping other people. So this
Mhm.
is like intrinsically a feminine quality, so to speak. And so you definitely have men who are coming through that same thing, but oftentimes who tend to be more sensitive, more empathic, more aware. So, but at the same time, there's still a balance, because with even with the feminine quality of love and giving, right? It's like an endless river. So that person needs to learn also how to stop the river, how to say no, how to establish boundaries, which is the masculine, right? The
Mhm.
the stopping. And so and you'll have other energies like netzach, which is strength, which is power, which is very clearly masculine. But in that, it's also the same. Each person needs to learn how to balance out the softness with the strength. So, yes, you have, just like you have, these energies show up in different cities. New York City is like so clearly masculine.
Mhm.
Hawaii is just flowing with nature. This is a feminine place, right? But so too, in each place, there are obviously, balance points of the other energy, and it's the same with each person, and each journey. So we all have a journey to balance out our unique energy, or our unique lens of the personality code. And within that is our own unique balance of the masculine and feminine energies that are playing themselves out through that role. 1,000%.
Okay. Yeah, because I was going to say that probably a lot of men or people who are in their masculine are going to be go through a gate, let's say, of power. I was just curious to know, like, if a lot of women come through that power
Ah,
portal, what that
sure.
looks like, right? Like, what does that look
Ah,
like of power in the feminine, without tipping so much into a masculine format, saying like, that's so focus driven, but that power holds. I mean, the feminine can hold her own power very much so, right? I think of Kelly, I think of Calypso, I think of those massive forces that flow and
sure.
have immense energy.
Yeah, 1,000%.
Okay. Yeah, and
Yeah, the
then the
power, the
masculine.
divine feminine, the power, 1,000%, the power of it all depends on where the energy flows. So you have a powerfully loving mother, and you can also have a woman who's coming through Netzach, who's a power player in business and real estate. So
Mhm.
a woman's power can show up, yeah, either through the masculine or the feminine, depending on what her journey is.
Mhm.
But even a powerful woman who's succeeding and crushing it in business, likely often she will have some work to do in balancing that her feminine side, whatever that looks like for her. Um, but yes, every man or woman can come through any of the more masculine or more feminine sides. Yeah, 1,000% it shows up all the time.
Yeah, and the masculine too. I think sometimes where my confusion has been is, we often associate power, just like softness and kindness, right, with the feminine, with the masculine, but keeping power, like, what does it look like to be the feminine in power, right, without tipping over to the masculine? And what does it look like for the masculine to hold in presence without tipping too far into the feminine?
So it depends through what lens we're looking at the conversation.
Hmm.
So if we're looking at the conversation through the lens of relationship and attraction, so you can have, for example, a man, like I grew up very much in my feminine my whole life. My mother and my sister, they were the strong energies in the family. And so I grew up only in my feminine for my teenage years. I never bought a girl a drink. I never approached a woman to ask her out, I was always approached. So I was
Mm,
in the feminine and I was attracting women who predominantly were in their masculine, right? Asking me out. Again, it's not a gender role. I was just in the feminine. I didn't know about the masculine. I didn't know about approaching. I didn't know about, offering safety and buying a drink and right. I didn't know about being in the masculine. I only discovered it many years later. So so it depends on which lens we're looking at it through. And so typically where men get stuck in relationships, let's say, is if you have a man who's very much in his feminine, he's not connected to his masculine, so he lacks the confidence or at least the ability to exude the confidence necessary to woo a woman to be attracted to him.
mhm,
Unless of course that's a woman who themselves is very much in the masculine. So for the man, it's learning how to understand and be grounded in his feminine, but also be equally grounded in his masculine. And it's a man who has a solid balance between his power to express himself and his purpose in the world, and his ability to navigate, sit with, and understand his feelings. That's
mhm,
what creates a very attractive man. It's not the alpha man who has no connection to his feelings whatsoever. That's very imbalanced. And so I would say for a man, that's where the balance lies. Also for a woman, uh, typically men are often, especially a balanced man, is going to be attracted to a woman who is very comfortable in her feminine and is able to be in her feminine, because it's the woman in her feminine that's going to bring the man who is in his masculine the peace and the calm and the refreshment that he's looking for in life. So he'll typically be attracted to a woman who is very feminine and also has that grounding in her masculine. So she's so
mhm.
she's not insecure. So she's not without the ability to express boundaries, right? So it's two complete balanced people. So it depends, and that's in the lens of relationship. And we can
Yeah.
explore the balance, through other lenses as well.
Yeah, I have so many questions I was going to ask you, but our time is running out, and I find it just goes by so quickly. I say this every time. I'm going to have to move into my questioning, so just bear with me. Um, all right, so I have my 10 questions based on Bernard Pivot's questions and James Lipton's The Actress Studio. This is my version. Um, what is one truth your body has always known that your mind took years to catch up to?
That the body knows, that my intuition, that I am always being guided, and I need to be grounded in my body and in my intuition, and to get out of my mind in order to navigate this world successfully.
Thank you. What is the most intimate moment you've ever had that had nothing to do with sex?
It would be gazing into the eyes of somebody I loved very much for what seemed like hours, and not needing to speak a word, but feeling very deep love and connection.
Mm. And if you could be remembered for one sensation you gave someone, what would it be?
The sensation of feeling full and alive and in love with themselves, warts and all, to feel completely energized and embodied and enjoying the experience of being themselves.
Mm. Thank you. If pleasure were a language, what would your first word be?
Love, from the
Mm.
Hebrew word hav, which means to give. Learning to love through the exercise of giving to another.
Mm. If your erotic life had a title, like a novel or a film, what would it be called?
Finding the road to peace.
Mm. What is one thing you have never said out loud, but you wish someone would ask you about?
I've said everything. I can't even think of something that I haven't said.
Mm.
I'm gonna pass.
Okay. What part of your erotic self are you still afraid to bring into the light?
The part that doesn't have it all figured out.
Okay, I like that.
The
Now, what
part that's
dies
still
in
a
you
child and still figuring it
and
out.
still in wonder? What dies in you when you pretend? And what comes alive when you don't?
When you pretend, we we lose connection with, I think, the our soul's divine essence,
Hmm.
and we lose connection with ourselves, which means we lose connection with God. And when we are our true selves, right? That we're just getting lost in the mask and the illusion of this world, and not actualizing our true potential here. So we're losing connection with ourselves.
Thank you. Finish this sentence. When I leave this life, I want my skin to remember.
The feeling of hugging the whole world,
Mm,
but especially my children.
mm, I hear that. And if the soul has a scent, what does yours smell like today?
Lavender.
Mm,
Oh,
mm,
no, not lavender. Jasmine.
mm. I'm a jasmine girl too. Beautiful.
Oh, it's
Um,
intoxicating.
it is. It's delicious. Okay, so is there anything that you want to impart our listeners with too today?
I would love to remind everybody that you are imperfect. We are imperfect beings in an imperfect world on a stage of never-ending growth and self-discovery, which means that your imperfections are what make you perfect, and you cannot make a mistake. You can't screw it up because you're here to grow, and try to enjoy the process, enjoy the journey, and spread as much love as you can.
Mm, I love it. And how can our listeners reach you, find you?
The best way to connect with me is via Instagram. I'm David
Mhm.
Bederman, Bederman, or via my website, personalitycode.me.
Beautiful. Thank you. And thank you for joining me. Thank you all for listening. We're stepping into the holidays, so we have one episode, or I'm going to see you, I think, actually in the new year. I'm not sure, but happy holidays. Um, and Hanukkah is right around the corner as well, right? So happy Hanukkah.
Uh, we've already turned the corner. Today is
Have
the
we turned the
second night,
corner?
so
Oh,
it's the second night.
I'm a terrible Jew. Oh my God. Yeah, I hang my
You're
head in
amazing.
shame.
You're
I'm
wonderful.
amazing. Thank you. So, if
Happy
anybody wants to
Hanukkah.
connect, happy Hanukkah, Merry Holidays, Happy New Year. If anybody wants to know more about what I do, I'm at gwenmcarsley.com. I'm a body, sex, and soul coach. Thank you again for joining me here. And until next time. Thank you for listening to Skin and Soul with me, Gwenm. Join me Fridays at 10 a.m. PST on Transformation Talk Radio. Catch the podcast anytime on your favorite platforms. You can follow me on Instagram at Luvology. Ready to take the next step? Book a compatibility call with me at gwenmcarsley.com.